Okay, so we need to talk about Tarzan. I'm kind of shocked and amazed that we have to go here, but here we are. So last month I made a video talking about how Disney music works more or less, and in that video I blamed Phil Collins for ending the Disney Renaissance, the decade between 89 and 99 where Disney had an amazing run of animated feature films. And people went ballistic in the comments section. I even got a request on my Patreon page to kind of address how I threw Phil Collins under the bus, and well, here we are. Even though in that last video I lazily threw up the text, it wasn't a musical, to try and briefly explain my position, because like the whole video is about how Disney's always looked to musical theater for inspiration, and I'm not really going to go into it. You can just go check out that video if you want to know more. But the backlash to that comment is really emblematic of the entire problem with Tarzan. People got really upset about me complaining about Phil Collins, but not Tarzan. Let me ask you a question. How is it that a film with the largest budget out of any of the Disney Renaissance films, that had great reviews by critics as opposed to some other Renaissance films, turned a great profit and even developed new technologies for animation? You can go check out BREADSWORD's video on Treasure Planet if you're curious about deep canvas technology. But how is it that something with all that success was the film that ended the Disney Renaissance? Think about it. Why is it that Jane is never included in a Disney princess ensemble? You're probably thinking it's because, well, she's not a princess, right? Well, neither is Megara or Esmeralda, but you see people talking about them all the time. Why don't they sell Tarzan merch with all the other Disney stuff at Hot Topic? Why is it so hard to find something that's Tarzan themed? Why is it that Clayton isn't remembered as one of the big bad guys like Ursula or Gaston or Scar? Why is it that everyone loses their minds over these new live action Disney remakes, but not a single person cared or even saw the live action Tarzan remake back in 2016? Why does no one care about Tarzan? Because not even Disney cares about Tarzan. And you want to know how I know that? Because that 2016 live action remake wasn't even made by Disney. It was made by Warner Brothers. So here's the thing. Tarzan's like a really great film. The visuals are spectacular. The animation is great. I love the characters. The writing is fantastic. I really like what the composer Mark Mancina did with the score, like adding this little love leitmotif for Jane and Tarzan. And yeah, I even like the Phil Collins songs in their own right. But there's this critical, fundamental aspect of Tarzan that completely failed. And it's why Tarzan hasn't really been able to stand the test of time when you compare it to the other Renaissance films. So in my last video, I talked about how Disney music is so popular because it follows the tradition of musical theater, and how Howard Ashman, the brains of the operation, knew all these techniques and consciously made choices that would have these films closer emulate a traditional music theater style, and he ultimately made Disney a ludicrous amount of money. And because these films were designed as musicals, it's really worth looking at these films more like you would a traditional musical. Because like, yeah, you can just look at these like they're straight films, but if you do, then you're gonna kind of miss out on some of the nuance that made these films so great. For example, there's this old adage in musical theater, an ancient proverb, if you will. When the emotion becomes too strong for speech, you sing. And when it becomes too strong for song, you dance. This is how and why you find people who market themselves as a triple threat. These are performers who are trained actors, trained singers, and trained dancers, which is more or less critical to any leading roles in any musical. You gotta be able to do all three. And you can very easily find examples of this in traditional theater. Pick any musical and people are talking until they're overcome with emotion and break out into song. And when the intensity of the song isn't enough, they break out into dance. Not accomplishing this transition smoothly comes off as jarring, and it's not only something that can feel kind of cheesy, but doing this incorrectly is the go-to move when people want to make fun of musicals.
You're so beautiful. B flat.
The night is young.
No.
People looking.
She's yours.
Don't sing. It's okay. You know, let's just walk. Can we walk?
Now, I mentioned this in my last video, but the animators at Disney commended Ashman for his ability to seamlessly transition from spoken word to song. You wouldn't even realize it was happening.
We had dialogue in the script. I was like, no. We will back that vamp up under the earlier dialogue, so he will be speaking over that musical vamp. So you make the transitions between the sung stuff and the dialogue stuff as seamless as possible.
And you don't even realize that you've gone from sort of a scene where characters are just interacting naturally. Suddenly they're singing, but the change just happens kind of without even noticing it.
Well, that's the whole point. That's what good musical theater would do. Bad musical theater is just breaking out into song because you feel like it with absolutely no preparation. Having the smooth transition won't immediately make your musical fantastic, and at the same time, I'm sure you're going to find great examples of people just jumping into song, I'm sure of it. But the idea behind transitioning between these varying tiers of emotional intensity is to organically express how a character's emotional intensity will change over time. So let's take a look at a clear example. Let's use Under the Sea. It opens with Sebastian talking to Ariel.
Will you get your head out of the clouds and back in the water where it belongs?
Then we get a vamp underneath Sebastian talking to Ariel.
Down here is your home. Ariel, listen to me. The human world, it's a mess.
Sebastian then breaks out into song, but it's a solo.
The seaweed is always greener in somebody else's lake.
And as the song builds and builds, we get more voices, a choir, and oh, would you look at that, there are fish dancing. It's a giant ensemble dance number now. This is, in essence, just a perfect example of how to do it, and you can see this everywhere in Disney. Like right here, Simba's talking.
Well, when I'm king, that'll be the first thing to go.
He's talking over a vamp.
Well, in that case, you're fired.
Nice try, but only the king can do that.
And then he breaks into song and the set changes.
I'm gonna be a mighty king.
And although it's highly stylized, you can see how this is an interpretation of a dance number. It doesn't necessarily interrupt your suspension of disbelief. You can still believe that these are animals. Lumiere opens the number by talking and is almost immediately joined by music.
It is with deepest pride and greatest pleasure.
He breaks into song.
Be our guest. Be our guest. Put our service to the test.
And we finish with, again, a giant ensemble dance number.
Tonight you'll rock your feet up, but for now let's eat up. Be our guest.
This is more or less our cut and dry musical theater formula, but what's so important about this formula is that it demonstrates the intensity of how the character feels. You, the audience, form a deeper emotional connection with these characters because you can better understand and experience how they feel through the medium of musical theater. As Sebastian is overcome with his love for living under the sea and wanting to keep Ariel away from the surface world, the song builds and builds. We get a better emotional understanding of how he feels about the sea and his desire to keep Ariel safe. Same with Simba and his desire to be king, and Lumiere finally being able to host a guest. This formula is critical to utilizing the language of musical theater to communicate emotional information that you might not otherwise be able to get across to an audience if you were just making a non-musical film. We don't just get to see Ursula trying to sell Ariel on signing this contract, we can feel it. We get a better emotional understanding of her motivations and intentions. Same with Scar and his plans, same with the horrifying creepiness of Frollo, and really, nothing communicates who, what, and why Gaston is the way he is better than his song.
Oh, I'm roughly the size of a barge.
This translates to any and all characters, but especially the protagonist. That titular I Want song is them showing the audience their feelings, motivations, and who they are as a character. It's an opportunity for the audience to form a visceral connection with our main character through a means that otherwise isn't available in traditional film. They're expressing themselves with an emotional intensity that is otherwise not possible with just the spoken word within the context of this musical theater system. They don't just want something, it's who and what they are as a character, and you feel that.
The characters actually run out of words, can't express themselves anymore, and it has to come out in song.
You get to a certain point where the crab has to convince the mermaid not to go up above the water and change her life, so he has to sing Under the Sea. And she has to sing Part of Your World because she wants to go up to dry land so badly.
So, in The Little Mermaid, Ariel wants to be where the people are, and she sings it to us. In Beauty and the Beast, Belle wants something more than this provincial life, and she sings it to us. In Aladdin, Aladdin wants people to look closer and find out that there's so much more to him, and he sings it to us. In The Lion King, Simba wants to be the main event, like no king was before, and he sings it to us. In Pocahontas, she wants to be free to explore once more just around the river bend, and she sings it to us. In The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo wants to spend a single day out there, and he sings it to us. In Hercules, Hercules wants to find where he belongs, and he sings it to us. In Mulan, she wants to have her outward appearance be a reflection of who she feels she is inside, and she sings it to us. In Tarzan, he wants to know more about the strangers like him, and Tarzan doesn't sing it to us. Phil Collins does. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, a colossal issue. Like, yes, you can look at the lyrics and say, sure, this is an I Want song. The lyrics are explicitly saying what Tarzan wants. I want to know, can you show me? I want to know about the strangers like me. But it's delivered by Phil Collins' disembodied voice, making him a narrator.
Songs simply on the soundtrack as if the narrator is saying something.
As if the narrator's going, ooh, staying alive, staying alive. I mean, who is singing that, right? but if you take it seriously and look at it as structure, who's singing that is God out there. Who's singing that is the narrator's voice. Who's singing that is the filmmaker making a comment.
Compare that to something like Hercules, where, yeah, there are narrators, but we get to see them. The muses had some kind of tangible characterization. But in Tarzan, since the narrator's voice isn't given any kind of representation in the story, a lot of the emotional weight provided by the music doesn't stick to the narrative. Now, you can't form an emotional connection with Tarzan's wants and desires the same way you might be able to with someone like Hercules or Mulan, because on that same deep emotional level, it doesn't really feel like it's Tarzan that has these wants. We don't get an I want song. We get a he wants song. And the part that is the most infuriating about this is that it was done on purpose. When talking about the music, one of the directors, Kevin Lima, said this: "I did not want Tarzan to sing. I just couldn't see this half-naked man sitting on a branch breaking out in song. I thought it would be ridiculous." Which, like, okay. I'm sorry. Were we to assume that this film wouldn't be ridiculous? Because you have a monkey wearing a boot like a crown leading a swarm of monkeys with an umbrella. You have an elephant that is aware of and concerned by water sanitation. We're supposed to believe that your main character, who spent his whole life in the jungle, just shaves for the hell of it. There's a woman in the opening of this film who is shipwrecked and stranded somewhere in the jungles of Africa, but somehow happens to maintain perfect ringlets in her hair. There is a scene in this film where our ape man catches a Victorian era woman by the feet. He doesn't just catch her by his feet, but he supports her entire weight by interlocking his toes with hers and carrying her by her foot with his feet, all while also supporting the weight of a swarm of some kind of rabid primate while also swinging through the jungle on a vine. I think we passed ridiculous a while ago. But what's more frustrating is that that's the whole point. What's not ridiculous about a crab singing to a bunch of talking fish? Or a candelabra putting on a dinner show with a bunch of dancing cutlery? Or a couple going at Mach 17 without suffocating or freezing while singing and being able to hear each other on a carpet? What's not ridiculous about Lion Hamlet, or three gargoyles from a medieval cathedral playing poker and singing on a piano, or literally anything from Pocahontas? The absurdity is what makes these films work. Seriously, animation already requires a greater suspension of disbelief. You have to believe that the drawings you're watching are moving and are, in some way, alive. And with that more abstract sense of what is and is not real, it's easier to sell people on characters breaking out into song and dance, which is the critical language of musical theater.
Howard saw animation as a way of keeping musicals alive because there's an inherent stylization in animation.
Music may have more license in the animated film in the same way that it does in the theater, simply because the level of reality is different.
In many ways, the vehicle of animation serves to amplify the emotional intensity provided by musical theater. The cartoons make the singing better in terms of the story, which is why the live-action remakes will never be as good as the animated originals. So yeah, there's really no reason to not have a scene where Jane's trying to teach Tarzan English, and as they start to understand each other more and more, they start singing and you can feel some kind of connection between them. Because at the moment, the vibe is that Jane's just really into country boys and finds a half-naked dude in the jungle, starts drawing fan art of him, and then gets all excited about planning her group cosplay when he agrees to go home with her, and then decides to abandon her entire life to live in the jungle for a few weeks before she dies from some kind of infectious disease that's foreign to her immune system. It goes by kind of quick, and we don't really get a great sense of her motivations or really anything about her as a character. So not only did the director, or I guess directors, completely miss the boat on how and why these films were so astonishingly successful when it came to making Tarzan, but they thought that they could just replace all of the intricate lattice work of what made these films work in the first place with a really popular musician. There's just a lot going on in this film that serves to undermine what made this Disney formula work in the first place, and it never really seems to answer the problems that it creates. Even just the visual presentation is rough when it comes to these musical numbers. They're mostly just played over some kind of montage, which more or less turns the musical numbers into music videos that interrupt the flow of the narrative.
And then there's a tradition of music as background, and which has been evolving with music video, in a sense, to a new place. Music, songs simply on the soundtrack as if the narrator is saying something.
And that's not to say that montages don't work necessarily, just look at One Last Hope from Hercules or I'll Make a Man Out of You from Mulan. Both montages, although both centering around our main character, are from the point of view of one of the supporting characters. In both instances, these numbers serve to bring us emotionally closer to Phil and Li Shin, respectively. But when you take that montage style and add that disembodied voice to it, it just feels way more like a music video than a tune from a musical. Like, if you like Phil Collins, great. If you like his songs in this film, great. There's nothing wrong with that. And to be clear, on its own, I like the music that Collins wrote for Tarzan as well. But these songs and the way that they're presented in this film brutally incapacitate the musical and emotional connection you make to the characters and the story. Take You'll Be in My Heart, for example. It opens with Kala, Tarzan's gorilla mom, singing to him.
Just take my hand, hold it tight.
And this is great. This is like damn near perfect. We're kind of getting this like baby mine moment from Dumbo. This is a wonderful, visceral connection.
Baby mine, don't you cry.
But almost immediately it cuts to Phil Collins singing, which I can't play because the YouTube copyright bot is not my friend right now. But cutting from Kala singing to Phil Collins completely strips all the emotional connection you're making with this situation. And this, by definition, isn't bad. It's just, okay, all right, let's compare it to something else. Let's look at Can You Feel the Love Tonight from The Lion King. Most of the song is sung by either Nala, Simba, or a choir. But even when Nala and Simba are singing, we don't see their characters' mouths moving. They aren't really, we aren't seeing them sing. But check out how this number opens.
I can see what's happening. What? And they don't have a clue.
Oh! It opens with Timon singing the lyrics to a Pumbaa who is responding by just talking. This is our in-universe transition to this song, and the tune ends the same way it begins. Timon finishes the song, which anchors all of the emotional content within the context of the film and the characters.
And if he falls in love tonight.
But we never come back to Kala and Tarzan going to sleep. I mean, we do, but we never cut back to Kala singing to Tarzan and having Kala close the number. So that big musical moment just kind of seeps away into the ether instead of staying in this mother-son moment. Or look at this scene here, where the gorillas perform Trash in the Camp. Now, this tune might be the biggest problem of the entire film. So right off the bat, the first thing you notice is that this isn't Phil Collins. In fact, this is the only number in the whole film that isn't performed by Phil Collins at all. At the same time, this is the only song that prominently and exclusively features characters from the cast. So this tune has the potential to be our one and only song in this whole film that can actually function as a traditional Disney tune within the structure of the narrative. And what do we get? Well, listen to the lyrics. There are no lyrics. The only tune that even tries to follow the musical theater formula, the Disney formula, and it somehow pries open all of the issues with this film. This number is somehow simultaneously the most Disney-sounding song in the whole film, while also being the least Disney-sounding song in the entire Disney catalog, Collins' work excluded. Why did these gorillas get the only piece of music that wasn't written or performed by Collins? What made these characters so special? Why are these characters suddenly and diegetically performing music? Are gorillas just musical creatures in this world? Which, again, is in direct contrast to the entire point of what Ashman said made these animated films work. You're already having to sit there and believe that animals and rocks can talk. Singing isn't that much of a stretch. So not only does this number not seem to fit within the tone of the film because it's the only tune not performed by Collins, but it also throws away the only opportunity that this film has to develop any kind of traditional musical characterization or motivation a la musical theater. Again, if you like this piece of music, great. I get it stuck in my head all the time, but why is this piece of music here? What is the purpose of this tune? What does it accomplish? What are you learning about the gorillas or Tantor or the humans? And why was it so important and emotionally significant that it needed its own musical number?
Howard said if you can take a song and you can remove it from the script and the script still makes sense, you haven't done your job properly.
At almost every twist and turn, this film serves to undermine and invalidate what made the Disney formula work so well. It's so bizarre to see. It had the success of a Disney Renaissance film, but completely missed the point on what made them so successful. They took this formula that had made Disney an extraordinary amount of money, almost completely ignored the nuance of it, and just replaced it all with Phil Collins. So at a glance, you kind of get the impression that maybe one of the directors was just a giant Phil Collins fan and wanted him in the movie. But this film is such an unbelievable deviation from the Renaissance pattern that you can't really help but think that they did all of this on purpose. Because like Kevin Lima was the director for the Goofy movie, which immediately gives him sainthood in my book. And Chris Buck went on to co-direct Frozen, like the Frozen. So it's not like these guys are bad directors or anything. They know what they're doing. They know what's up. So like benefit of the doubt here, maybe they saw where the film industry was going. Like it had been a whole decade of these movies. Maybe people were just getting tired of the musical structure. At the same time, Pixar was gaining major traction with films like Toy Story and A Bug's Life that were explicitly non-musical. No singing, nothing. So maybe the directors sought to undermine the Disney formula as a means of transitioning into a new era of Disney films. Because none of the films after Tarzan were musicals, not until Princess and the Frog in 2009, a decade later. winner. So they replaced all the music of a traditional Disney film with music from a very successful musician. And so now, almost 2 decades later, people really love the music by Phil Collins, but no one really cares about Tarzan. No one wants Tarzan on a shirt because they never formed the same emotional connection with him that they did with the other Disney characters. No one includes Jane in a Disney princess lineup because she didn't get her own song, not even a love song. No one puts Clayton in with the fun Disney villains like Ursula or Gaston or Scar because he doesn't have his own musical number. And no one batted an eye at this live action remake. So when you complain about the music in Tarzan, everyone gets upset because they all like the music, which is totally fair. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but the fact that you don't get the same connection between the music and the characters like you do with the other Disney films is why the music is remembered so well, but the film isn't. I like Tarzan, I like this movie, and I like the music that Phil Collins wrote, but together, it misses what made the Disney Renaissance, well, the Disney Renaissance. The directors got away with making a successful Disney movie without making a successful Disney movie. It feels like a Disney movie without feeling like a Disney movie. That's how it ended the Renaissance despite being a massively successful film. And that is the problem with Tarzan. Thanks for watching. I'd like to thank my patrons for making these videos possible, with an extra special thank you to Andrew Luke, AFN Matt, Clara Tan, Dr. Woe, Donovan Hodges, DJ Now Ananda, Hayden Elza, Jordan Adams, Karen Rosenau, Who Am I, and Zolbu Tuman Dumbrell. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and check out the other videos on my channel. Follow me on Twitter and Twitch to have your musical questions answered live, and if you really like what I'm doing, then consider supporting the channel on Patreon. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching.